many objects in this image can you recognize? When I showed this picture to my mom, she suggested she could make out a blurry Raggedy Ann doll. When I showed it to my older sister, she could swear she saw the outline of a Charizard somewhere in there. Neither of those characters are in this image, of course. The picture is merely the result of AI-generated nondescript shapes and textures, but strangely enough, that doesn't mean they didn't see what they described. The viral image is sometimes compared to the works of James Leland Kirby, or more specifically, his art for Everywhere at the End of Time. The album and imagery is designed to capture the experience of dementia. As you might imagine, it's an uncomfortable listen. Perhaps you too were unsettled when you were forced to stare into this image. That would be the effect of the uncanny valley. The idea is that something looks so similar, so near nostalgic, and yet something logical in your brain tells you that's not right. Which, of course, begs another question. Why is it trying so hard to trick me? Doppelgangers have been a mainstay in horror for just about as long as horror media has existed, from mythologies all over the world to authors like Percy Shelley or Edgar Allan Poe. Although the details vary, a few tropes are consistent between them. 1. There is a double of you somewhere out there. 2. The double is in some way searching for you. And 3. Crossing paths will result in your misfortune. Like most classic horror creatures, doppelgangers are meant to reflect our own fears and insecurities, though unlike a group of teenagers being slaughtered at a summer camp, the doppel is a somewhat more literal reflection of that. Sure, an axe-wielding maniac is frightening for obvious reasons, but why have we always been so scared of ourselves? In a weird way, it's almost comforting to know that even thousands of years ago, there still existed the primal, almost existential fear of confronting oneself. From Alzheimer's to the uncanny and, of course, the tethered of us. They all frightened by forcing us to come to grips with the fact that we are rarely as we perceive ourselves. That we look into the mirror and someone else might just stare back. So, to catch us all up to date, Us is a 2019 horror film written and directed by Jordan Peele, who is of course famous for writing Get Out, and later Nope. The premise of the film is that an upper-class black family visits their vacation home when they are unexpectedly attacked by a group of intruders who look exactly like them. Us was actually my first Jordan Peele film, and I think it's his best movie. At least, I think that's the one that's aged the best, and maybe by the end of this video you'll agree. Although Us was a successful film, I've always wondered why it failed to get the same mainstream attention or lasting legacy as Jordan Peele's other works. I think a large part of this is that Us isn't as easy of a watch. It's not like Get Out, which, well, yeah, sure, there's references and hints you can look into. You can also casually watch it once and get pretty much everything it has to offer. So what is the message of Us, and why do I think it's a lot richer than its IMDb score would let on? At its core, Us is about classism, which of course is closely tied to racism, especially in the West and even more so in America, but I do think it's vital to understand the film's message to make that distinction. It is the intersectionality between racism and classism that this film really seeks to explore and where I find its most compelling messaging. So let me ask you this: why home invasion? Horror movies draw upon our societal fears and traumas. Home invasion as a genre has always sought to play on society's fear of poor people. The protagonist of your typical home invasion film is an upper-middle-class white family, often being preyed upon by your societal dregs. Now, don't misunderstand my explanation to mean that in order to relate to the subgenre, you have to be wealthy. So long as you exist under capitalism, you have a fundamental conditioning against the homeless, the destitute, the failures of society. In order for capitalism to function, there needs to be an underlying anxiety that if you're not pushing forward, others are catching up, and that if you find yourself at the bottom, you most certainly deserve to be there. In fact, one could argue the less you have, the more desperately you tend to hold on to it, hence why so many poor people are scared of other poor people. I grew up in one of the poorest counties in all of the US, and yet a home invasion was my biggest fear growing up. I'd have reoccurring nightmares about it for years and years, and I can sort of lucid dream, so there's actually just a 10-installment home invasion action series starring myself locked deep in my subconscious. Think for a moment just how similar Us is to another masterpiece from 2019, Parasite. Now, admittedly, Parasite is a very atypical home invasion movie, but it does check all the boxes. A poor family strategically targets a rich one, plotting against them, stealing, and eventually even committing murder. Except Parasite does something very interesting in framing this story from the perspective of the poor instead of the rich. And its scope increases as we are shown an even more destitute family literally living underneath the rich home unbeknownst to anyone else. The question Parasite begs us to ask is, which family are the parasites exactly? The rich family could not maintain their immaculate lifestyle were it not for the sacrifices of those beneath them. This is illustrated quite literally by the fact that the father of the rich family, Mr. Park, assumes he has motion-activated lights going up the stairs when, in actuality, there is a poor husk of a man living underneath his home triggering each of the lights, and he is none the wiser. One might even call it willfully ignorant. Us starts with a rather similar scene when I Got 5 on It comes on and the kids ask about the meaning of the song. Their father says,
"It's not about drugs, it's a dope song, don't do drugs."
This is commodification of the hood. As opposed to confronting the messaging within the song, explaining its history to his children, or at least being honest, Gabe just kicks the can down the road. There is no need to understand it. Snap your fingers, bob your head to the melody. And you might think I'm being a little critical of the guy. He was with his kids, they're trying to relax, and hey, you're not wrong. Both of those statements are true. What is also true is that they're jamming out to a song about selling pot, written by men who they probably wouldn't let their kids meet. This scene isn't Gabe committing some cardinal sin, rather it is perfectly illustrating the casual dismissal, the choice to ignore inconvenient truths despite them staring us right in the face. Real quick, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I also read and try to respond to a good amount of the comments, so let me know your thoughts down below. Anyway, back to the video. Yet, as critical of Gabe as I am, oh boy do I relate to this guy. In my Why Nerd Culture is Scared of Black People video, I was shocked to see just how overwhelmingly positive the comments were. Good on y'all. But of course, you don't make a video called this and not expect a few bad eggs to roll in. And of all of those hate comments, one of the ones I found the most funny was accusing me of hating white people. Now, while yes, this comment is simply the result of white guilt and oversensitivity, I can't help but find it hilarious because only if they knew. I have exactly one black friend and they are the editor of the video you're watching right now. Although I did grow up in an incredibly poor area, I went to school in rich, predominantly white Catholic schools. Even in college, pretty much all of my friends were either white or Asian. And this is something I am still pretty insecure about, that I'm not black enough. And if many of the comments on that aforementioned video can speak to anything, I feel like that's an experience a lot of black nerds can relate to. So often we are told what we're allowed to enjoy, how to act and how to behave. Heck, I know at least someone watching this heard my voice and fully thought they were listening to a white guy, be honest. That scene where Gabe tries to intimidate the tethered by code switching, like, yeah, on one end it's the cringiest shit I've ever seen, but on the other end, like, I've done something similar to this before. And well, the uncomfortable truth here is that the reason he does this, the reason so many of us have done this, is because we would find a person with those mannerisms frightening. Like a badger on its hind legs trying to scare off a lion, we process it as a defense mechanism to ward off predators. That's a rather disquieting truth, but one I've witnessed within my own family. For one reason or another, me and my mom were discussing blackness in America. Now, this was very important to me at the time, because much like how Gabe runs his family, we didn't talk about race, and it felt like I was finally all grown up. She quoted to me a Chris Rock joke. And I'm sure just saying that some of you already know the one.
I love black people, but I hate niggas, bro.
Even as an impressionable teenager, I could smell something was wrong there. The obvious issue with the sentiment is how much it truly feeds into hysteria, lacks any understanding regarding education, crime, systemic racism, and of course, feeds into the self-hating Negro stereotype. And when I say that, we think of Uncle Ruckus, or maybe Low Tier God.
You're on Earth for literally no fucking reason.
But it's often more subtle than that. Throughout the film, each of the family members face off against their tethered counterpart, who is often a better, more realized version of themselves. Pluto gets his magic tricks right, unlike Jason. Umbra is faster than Zora. Red is the better dancer, yet Gabe's evil counterpart is, to be blunt, the big dumb black man. He is black people as they are portrayed in Birth of the Nation. Unintelligible, the furthest self-image Gabe could possibly have from himself with his boat and his Howard sweater. And yet, Gabe is forced to battle just what society at large will always see him as. Kanye put it well, even if you in a Benz, you still a nigga in a coupe. Our society was built on the back of slavery. Not only that, but as discussed earlier, capitalism requires us to develop a crippling fear of poverty for it to function. Mix these together, and you get graphs that look like this. And of course, instead of tackling the issue, we'll pretend like crime hasn't always been an act of desperation by the poor. No, instead, fear thy neighbor, and if you really need someone to blame, fight amongst yourselves. Us mixes the themes of home invasion with far more introspective questions posed by a typical doppelganger story. It takes those outward fears and reflects them inwards. Are we the predators or the prey? Are we the victims or the predators? Are we the hosts or the parasites? The tethered are the antagonists, right? They wield scissors and are trying to kill everybody, but again, it's not that simple. What the tethered are really after is revenge. They seek out their surface counterpart who they share a special sort of bond with. There is a clear idolization of the surface world, a desire to be as they are. Just as the upper middle class is scared of their lowers, so too do the poor dream of one day reaching that status. Furthermore, the tethered are a government experiment created from some sort of MK Ultra-esque operation that was ultimately abandoned. I could use this as an opportunity to go into the US government's very real history of experimenting on its own citizens, but I think we've had enough tangents for one video, so instead, I want to relate this back to the central theme of classism. The tethered are not well hidden, and while it may verge on being a plot hole, I do think it's there for a narrative purpose. At the end of the day, are the Wilson family, their white friends, or any other victim of the tethered attack willfully ignorant? To a degree. But will killing them actually solve any of the tethered's issues? Certainly not. Class warfare is manufactured by the people at the top of it all. They want you to be scared of the poor. They want the poor envious and angry. Capitalism is like a casino and the house always wins. Despite such a massive lore drop, the people behind the tethered program never appear, nor is it really elaborated much beyond what I've said in this video. The tethered are envious of the Wilsons. The Wilsons are envious of their slightly richer white friends, but at the end of the day, they all serve the same master under the same system. I think my point regarding the film's themes are best exemplified in its twist ending. Adelaide defeats Red and the family drives off having survived the night and conquered their doubles. Jason stares at his mom and slowly puts the puzzle pieces together, realizing that she is the original tethered Adelaide and that Red was actually from the surface originally. The exchange they have is interesting because it's not hostile in any of the ways you might initially expect, and I think both of their rather reserved reactions are a result of what the twist really means in context. His mother being the original tether of Adelaide means that it's a matter of environment. There's almost a biracial identity crisis element to it. Does that mean that Jason is actually tethered? What I think actually hits him here is the plain reality that he could have just as easily been born on that side of the fence instead. And when he puts his mask down at the end, I don't think it's out of fear. It's not really played that way. Instead, I read acceptance. The kind where you certainly admit you have a lot to come to terms with, but you're past the stage of running from those questions. It's not exactly comfortable, you might not even share it with others yet, but internally, you know you're ready. I had just graduated from high school, and one of my classmates from K through 8th grade had decided to host a reunion party. Now, like I said before, I went to schools with some rich kids, like I knew folks who were next door neighbors with NFL players. So in order to head to this reunion, I had to go to a part of the city I'd never been to before. I just remember going up for a really long time. The house was at the top of this hill. It really was like the home straight out of Parasite. So I reach the mansion, give a knock at the door, and boom! There is this old man just staring straight into my soul. And I honestly don't think I have words to fully paint this picture, but the sheer mixture of animosity, distrust, hatred that were in this man's eyes. Hello, sir. I'm JD. I'm one of your daughter's classmates here for the reunion.
Why didn't you say so? Everyone's already outside on the patio. Oh, and we got food in the kitchen. Hope you like pizza.
And look, I had dealt with racism and profiling beforehand, and I've dealt with it after. I think I have pretty thick skin, which I attribute to being on Xbox 360 lobbies back in the day. That is to say, racism and stuff has never really gotten to me. Except for this one time. I think it was that shift, this almost seamless change between this unadulterated hatred to all the hospitality the world could offer. He wasn't some white nationalist or a neo-Confederate. This was a man who looked me up and down before deciding in his head, oh, actually, he's one of the good ones. It was a weird moment that forced me to realize exactly how people were gonna always view me as a black man in America. I remember being really quiet on the way home. Just like Jason, that was the day I decided I was going to confront my identity and begin wrestling with who I was and how the world was going to perceive me. This, I believe, is the point of Us. It encourages the audience to be not like Gabe, but like Jason. Why is it that when we talk about American colonization, you're bound to get some asinine comment like, well, the natives killed each other for thousands of years before we came? These people are insecure. They have fragile egos, and when charged to think critically and confront the truth right in front of their faces, they lash out with nihilism and oftentimes nonsensical projections. Of course, nobody is immune to it, and as Us shows, it can be just as easy for a black family to turn their head, ignore the society they exist in, and just keep snapping their fingers. The film encourages us to all stop playing into the willful ignorance. Basically, stay woke. Thank you for watching. God bless and have a wonderful night.